The War of Wrath was the climactic war of the First Age. Moved to mercy by the pleas of Eärendil, the Valar finally sent help to Middle-earth. The host of the West, led by Eonwë, the Herald of Manwë, landed on the shores of Beleriand and proceeded to battle the forces of Morgoth for 42 years. In the end, Morgoth was defeated, but the victory came with an earth-changing cost. The entire subcontinent of Beleriand, a place of so many tragedies and triumphs, sunk beneath the waves. In this video, we ask the question, how was the War of Wrath so destructive that it sank an entire region? The most frustrating thing about the War of Wrath is just how little we know about it. In terms of scale, it was probably the largest war that was ever fought in Middle-earth by mortals. Morgoth's forces alone were said to be so large that the plain of Anfalglyph could not hold them. In terms of length, it took so long that a man that was young at the start of the war would have been old by the end of the war. It saw the final overthrowing of Morgoth, the first Dark Lord, yet despite all of this, in the Silmarillion, the entire war gets about a page and a half. So naturally, we don't get told in depth how and why Beleriand got torn apart, but we are given a short description about how badly the land was damaged. For so great was the fury of those adversaries that the northern regions of the western world were rent asunder, and the sea roared in through many chasms, and there was confusion and great noise, and rivers perished or found new paths, and the valleys were upheaved, and the hills trod down, and Sirion was no more. According to this, the destruction was so great that not even any geographical feature was safe. Redirecting or destroying rivers is one thing, but leveling hills, upheaving valleys, and tearing holes in the land that allowed the ocean to rush in is next level destruction. It genuinely sounds like the war was fought with weapons out of a sci-fi universe. But make no mistake, there is precedent for this level of destruction in Middle-earth. The Battle of the Powers, fought between the Valar and Morgoth thousands of years earlier, saw vast sections of the world get reshaped. And that's what these two wars have in common. The Ainur, meaning the Valar and the Maiar. Of course, Morgoth was one of the Valar, and he had many powerful Maiar servants, such as Sauron and the Balrogs. On the other side, the host of the West was led by Eonwë, widely considered to be the most powerful of the Maiar. It's not a stretch to assume that he was accompanied by other Maiar, and I've seen some people theorize that some of the Valar, such as Tulkas or Orome, may have also joined the war. That said, I don't believe there is any direct evidence of this. While power and magic is never thoroughly explained in Middle-earth, we do see plenty of evidence that the Ainur are capable of great destruction. Morgoth was once capable of reshaping the world. For example, he was responsible for the creation of the Misty Mountains and Mount Doom. Some of the other Valar were at least capable of the same. Ulmo could create islands. Even Maiar were capable of immense destructive power. Gandalf could summon lightning when displaying only a fraction of his power, Sauron could corrupt entire landscapes, and seemingly cause volcanoes to erupt. So when the host of the West faced off with Morgoth's armies, this power was probably unleashed. Your enemy is holed up in some mountains, why not clear the path by destroying the mountains? Your enemy is defending a river, why not simply remove the barrier by destroying the river? Alternatively, your enemy is advancing, why not raise some new obstacles such as mountains, hills, or rivers to slow them down or stop them completely? I can see legitimate uses of this power for both sides, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was employed more liberally by Morgoth's servants. They would care less about maiming the land and any collateral damage that it might cause. Now, if you're wondering, hold up, if Morgoth or Sauron or other Ainur are capable of such destruction, why didn't they do that in other wars? While I did just say before that magic and power is rather mysterious in Tolkien's universe, one thing we do know is that power is finite. When a powerful being does something, well, powerful, they spend their own power in doing so. There isn't really mana that regenerates over time. For example, Yavanna poured a lot of her power into creating the two trees, and could not replicate the feat. Morgoth poured much of his power into corrupting Middle-earth. Sauron poured much of his power into the One Ring. So, for the Ainur, it makes sense that they would only truly expend their power when it was necessary. If Morgoth could win wars conventionally in the past, then he didn't need to blow up mountains and destroy rivers. And it is possible that Morgoth poured much of his remaining power into the war effort, because for him, this was a fight for survival that he hadn't yet encountered fighting the elves and the Edain. While he was already significantly weakened by the time he returned to Middle-earth, by the end of the War of Wrath, he was weaker than Sauron was during the height of his own power in the Second Age. Perhaps Morgoth used the final dregs of his power to tear Beleriand to pieces in an effort to buy time for the finalization of his greatest experiment and creation yet, the winged dragons that he unleashed as the host of the West approached Angband. It ultimately didn't work, but it was certainly a shock at the time. Which brings me to the next question. How did Beleriand sink? All we know is that the region was submerged in 587 of the First Age, at the very conclusion of the war. Personally, this suggests to me that the sinking of Beleriand was intentional. While we are told that the ocean rushed in through many newly formed chasms, and while I have no doubts that some parts of Beleriand were completely submerged or destroyed before the conclusion of the war, the timing of the sinking raises eyebrows. It feels to me that if Beleriand truly was so badly destroyed, it wouldn't have politely waited until Morgoth was defeated before sinking beneath the waves. There's also no mention of anyone dying in the tumult, which leads me to assume that everyone was able to evacuate in time. What I believe to have happened is that after the war was over, everyone looked upon the destruction that had been wrought on Beleriand and decided that it wasn't worth saving, or it just really couldn't be saved. After all, everything that the elves and the Edain had built in Beleriand had been destroyed, either by Morgoth or during the war. And as far as nature went, if the war was truly that destructive, I can't imagine too much of it survived intact. What was left of Beleriand might have been barren wastelands and piles of rubble. So, with the land so thoroughly reduced, and also full of memories of tragedy and despair, I wouldn't be surprised if it was then intentionally sunk by someone like Ulmo. This would explain why some parts of Beleriand survived. When it comes to Tol Thuin, the remnant of Dorthonion, and Himring, the hill where Maedhros' fortress was built, it makes sense why they might have survived. They were elevated, and if they managed to survive the War of Wrath untouched, it makes sense that they remained above the water, whereas other places did not. But what about Tol Morwen, the island where Morwen and Turin were buried? This place was not elevated, so the only way it could have survived is if it was intentionally protected, or in other words, the sinking was controlled to some extent. Unfortunately, there's not much else to say. With other things that we don't know much about, there's often a lot of room to craft theories. But with the War of Wrath, even though it seems like there's a lot of room for interpretation, I actually don't think there is. Realistically, only the Ainur could have caused so much destruction, so they must be why Beleriand was so badly destroyed. As for the sinking of Beleriand, everything also suggests that it was done intentionally. It was to put a ruined land out of its misery, and to wipe the slate clean for anyone who was going to stay in Middle-earth. If there's one thing you could take away for sure from the War of Wrath and the destruction of Beleriand, it's that it makes sense why the Valar didn't want to directly intervene anymore. Every time they did, there was a huge amount of destruction, and in the end, the problem wasn't even truly solved. So in the Second and Third Ages, instead of using the nuclear option, they opted for indirect intervention. Well, except for the time they appealed to Iluvatar about Numenor, but that's kinda different. They sent emissaries who were meant to restrict their own power, and they seemingly occasionally chimed in with things like changing the weather. Sure, maybe they had a responsibility to come in and stop Sauron too, but would it be worth the potential destruction it might have caused? Maybe not. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it or at least found it interesting. Funnily enough, when I started writing this script, I had to double check the Middle-earth Mysteries playlist because I was thinking, how have I not done this video yet? I was surprised, but also happy to find out that I hadn't. Also, anything to extend the lifespan of that series, because I am running out of mysteries, slowly. Cheers, farewell, and remember, what was done to Beleriand is what should be done to France.